TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Tory leadership hopeful Rishi Sunak has told GB News that political correctness is affecting how grooming gangs are tackled in Britain. While speaking exclusively to Esther and Philip, he explained how he'd address the problem if he becomes Prime Minister.
You made a policy this week about tackling extremism and wanting to do more about that. I just wondered whether or not that would include doing more to tackle some of the grooming gangs that we see in our towns and cities across the country, Telford, Rotherham, Bradford, where my constituency is. What can you say to people in those areas about what you do to try and make sure that we clamp down more on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have two young girls who are 9 and 11, and I think for too long we just haven't focused on this issue, Philip. And it's a horrific crime that is affecting actually not just girls in a few places. It's far more pervasive across the country than actually we all realise. And we all know the reason that people don't focus on it. It's because of political correctness, and they're scared of calling out the fact that there's a particular group of people who are perpetuating these crimes. And I think that's wrong. And I want to change that as Prime Minister. So what I've said is we'll have a new task force at the National Crime Agency that's focused on this. We will have a requirement for police forces everywhere to prioritise this. I want to make sure that all police forces record the ethnicity of those involved, which currently is not done because people don't want to do that. And I want to create a brand new life sentence for those involved in grooming with very limited options for parole, because I'm not going to let political correctness stand in the way of tackling this absolutely horrific crime. I want to call it out for what it is, and I want to tackle it properly, because when you read about it, it's awful. And I have two young girls and I feel this very personally, but a Conservative government should be not letting political correctness stand in the way of keeping people safe, and that's what I want to do.
You can watch the full interview with Esther and Philip from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Archie Battersby's parents are said to be devastated after exhausting all legal avenues to extend his care. Life support for the 12-year-old, who's been in a coma since April, is due to be withdrawn at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's after the European Court of Human Rights said it would not intervene in the case, following a High Court ruling that he can't be moved to a hospice. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to headliners.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Making his Headliners debut is a man who has one successful stand-up set to his name. It's Toby Young. I say successful, that's up for debate. And next to him is a man with thousands of genuinely successful comedy sets under his belt. He's watched many, at least. It's Nick Dixon.
I was waiting for the little nasty jibe.
The sting in the tail. I don't know what's happened, but for some reason a proper journalist has sneaked into the studio. We'll have to fix that. Great to have you, Toby Young. We're going to get through the papers, and let's start with tomorrow's front pages. And we begin with the Daily Mail. And they're leading with the following. Reckless cyclists face jail crackdown. We'll discuss that with Toby Young and Nick Dixon shortly. The Daily Telegraph, NHS 111 crippled by cyber attack. And Liz Truss wins the Telegraph Readers' Poll. The Independent, Chinese warplanes cross Taiwan Strait. And banks' recession warning feared too optimistic. The Guardian now, China cuts ties with the US amid anger over Pelosi visit to Taiwan. The FT weekend, Truss insists on tax cuts instead of handouts to help households. Also, rare vintage wines pass the sniff test as investors seek hedges against inflation. The Times now, winter of woe means long waits for patients. Only 6 in 10 will be seen within 4 hours in what appears to be more bad news for the NHS. The Daily Express now, the saddest goodbye. Life support for tragic Archie Battersby. It will be turned off tomorrow, according to sources close to his family. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Star Trek. A professor fools the world with a picture of a new planet, except it's just a slice of chorizo. Well, perhaps he just wanted a pizza the action. And those are your front pages. Pizza the action doesn't even make sense. We kick off now with the Daily Mail and cyclists. Not a contentious topic at all, is it, Toby? Let's have a look at what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so the headline is Grant Shapps launches crackdown on killer cyclists. Transport Secretary vows to create new death by dangerous cycling law. And the story is that there is currently a loophole whereby if a reckless cyclist kills somebody whilst driving his or her bicycle, they can only be jailed for a maximum of 2 years. So Grant Shapps is going to fix this loophole. Apparently the last person to be prosecuted for killing someone on a bicycle was convicted under a Victorian law and convicted of furious and wanton driving. I mean, that's more or less all cyclists, isn't it, in London, certainly?
I would never dare say such a thing. But, this almost makes you wonder if Grant Shapps thinks he's still in the leadership race, because, you know, it's like one of those throwing red meat to the members sort of stories, but he hasn't realised he doesn't need to anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't... Yes, I'm not massively pro-cyclist, but I think we need a new law for scooters as well. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah.
9 years or so?
Well, I think so, because they're very powerful. And like lots of bicycles these days, Toby, they are electric. So they have torque. You know, they've got poke in them. They move.
Yeah, I hired a Lime bike earlier today.
Look at you.
And you can accelerate really quickly. You take off really quickly. It's actually quite dangerous. But then the speed limiter kicks in and you can't go above about 14 miles per hour. It's really frustrating. You think it's like being on a rocket that suddenly kind of stalls, you know, but actually quite fun.
And also fast enough to knock over an old lady or a kid perhaps.
Were you driving it exclusively along the pavement? Because that seems to be what people do with...
Do you think if the killer cyclist is a middle-aged man in Lycra, that should be an aggravating factor?
You would have thought that, I would have thought probably
the tight shorts, I'll give you another 5 years.
I think that's a shameful attack on Simon Evans, you know, trying to... while he's not here.
Listen, that guy's got abs and he's 50. Let's move on now to Saturday's Mirror, and Rishi Sunak is kind of like Robin Hood, but from the opposite world, Nick.
Yeah, scandalous Rishi Sunak brag about taking cash from deprived areas sparks probe calls, the worst kind of calls. And we have a video of this, Mark.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Show. Bit quiet.
Now, we're going to cover the sync of this. Hello, I'm Rishi Sunak, and I'm losing this election. I'm under massive pressure. I should have worn a tie. I shouldn't have interrupted Liz Truss. and I'm about to throw the towel in.
Make the rich richer, he said.
What Rishi Sunak said was effectively that. I think it's been taken out of context, hasn't it? Which is.
Do you want me to give you exactly?
Yeah, let's have the
verbatim, as if it had been played properly. I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure areas like this are getting the funding they deserve, because we inherited a bunch of formulas from Labour that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, and that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that. He said to Tunbridge Wells. He was playing the room, even though he was outside. He was playing the room. Let's just throw something to the Tunbridge Wells people. And the generous interpretation is that he meant we don't think about deprived rural areas, like many of the places I'm from. You know, we like places like Barrow, probably, or places in Lincolnshire or something. We don't really think about them. We give it all to urban areas. That's the generous interpretation. Of course, people are saying he's done because this was this terrible thing to say. I don't know if it's that bad. I mean, he survived the non-dom scandal. I was sort of thinking, yeah, he is done because of this. But then I watched the Sky debate, and he did so well in that I thought, oh, he's back in the game, even though sequentially that was actually earlier. Yeah, but it depends when you watch it.
Yeah, this felt to me like an example of Rishi trying to kind of out-Liz Liz. So, you know, she says she's going to cut taxes, he's going to cut taxes even more. She says she's anti-woke, he's even more anti-woke. She commits a couple of minor gaffes, he commits a massive gaffe to try and shore up his campaign.
His campaign looks to have been quite reactive and defensive, don't you think? Considering that at the early stages he was the heir apparent.
Yeah, he does seem to have. I mean, it's an illustration of the old saw that being the favourite in a Conservative leadership election is never a good place to be. Yeah. And that certainly seems to have done for him.
And Zach Goldsmith says this is one of the weirdest and dumbest things I've ever heard from a politician, and that's Zach Goldsmith. So, you know, it's not great. But do you think he's really done? Because I've heard some people saying this is it for him. He was already struggling. But if you watch that Sky debate, of course, maybe some people say it was a fairly Rishi-friendly audience, let's say. Guido Fawkes has mentioned Stooges. But, you know, it was a very Rishi-friendly audience, so you got the impression from that, oh, maybe he's got a chance.
And a Rishi-friendly presenter in Kay Burley.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's going to really send the Tory faithful to running for the hills, is the fact that The Guardian and Kay Burley clearly want Rishi Sunak to win.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, but Guido Fawkes, again, flagged up today, Liz Truss saying to Kay Burley, you know, well, we all made mistakes during the lockdown.
Yeah,
chaos.
And by the way, of course, I jest in relation to Kay Burley. She's a very brilliant professional, very neutral. But there's certainly people were interpreting that the sort of left-leaning media are desperate to stop Truss at all costs.
Yes, although apparently not the New Statesman who released this video, so maybe it doesn't go quite as far left as the New Statesman.
Well, they're playing the longer game.
Yeah, the election.
Well, I know. Actually, I mean, more seriously, if Sunak does go on to win, this would be a great party political broadcast. Him saying, "I've diverted money from deprived urban areas and given it to Tunbridge Wells."
Especially in the
that would be a great party political broadcast.
Also, that he's been characterised as this husband of a billionaire and out of touch and wearing $4,000 or $3.5 grand suits.
Plays to that weakness.
Can I just can we sort of look at the other side of this and offer some support for Mr. Sunak here, Toby? Because arguably the point he was making is that there is a pot of cash and it should be available to all of our communities. And yes, more deprived communities will be seen more favourably, but money's got to be spread around the country. And his argument in this speech, although, taken out of context and it's not the best look, is perfectly reasonable.
Actually, I think it is quite reasonable. And Lisa Nandy, who got up on her high horse about this, she's written to Greg Clark demanding an investigation, the Minister for Levelling Up, who replaced Michael Gove when he resigned. And she says in her letter, it is completely unacceptable for ministers to allocate taxpayers' funds in order to secure political gain for themselves or their party. And, of course, this formula was put in place by the last Labour government, which involved funneling funds to just deprived urban areas because that's where the Labour votes are. So, in fact, what she's accusing Rishi Sunak of doing is exactly what Labour did.
The whole point is that there are poor people struggling across the whole country, and even wealthy areas need investment.
Yeah, and
the
actually
country, you've got to,
Yeah, it isn't just in cities that people are deprived, certainly. And there are, I think, pockets of deprivation, even in Tunbridge Wells.
There you go. Who knew? And on that bombshell, from domestic matters to worrying international stories now, and Saturday's Times, Toby.
Yes, so this is quite an alarming story. It's about China has shunned cooperation with the US over Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan.
Wait a minute, I thought China were nice. What's going on?
Yeah, no, hard to believe, but they've said that they're no longer going to talk to the United States about, amongst other things, repatriating illegal migrants. And I thought to myself, Now, that can't refer to Americans illegally entering China and trying to stay in China. It must be that China have said, we're no longer going to repatriate illegal Chinese migrants who've gone to the United States. Well, if I was a Chinese migrant in the United States, I'd probably be quite relieved I wasn't going to be repatriated to China. I mean, it seems a bit of a feeble threat. But anyway, no, it is quite serious. And they've got these military exercises in the Taiwan Straits, and one analyst, one China specialist in China, admittedly says this could easily lead to war in this story. So it is all quite alarming. And there was one quite funny comment from someone using the huge Chinese version of Twitter, who said he complained, this was just an ordinary Chinese citizen, I waited until 1 a.m. last night to see our Air Force take down Pelosi's plane. All I could see is a repetition of harsh words from the Chinese government and random cannon fire financed by taxpayers' money. So disappointing. Like, he wanted a full-scale thermonuclear war and was disappointed when it didn't actually break out with the Chinese authorities.
Sure, it wasn't Donald Trump on it, and now he's banned from Twitter. Yeah, you wonder if it's just more posturing. I mean, we covered this story the other day of Pelosi going there and causing chaos, and somehow I missed the chance to say this would never have happened under Trump, which is kind of like the thing I always say. Because it wouldn't, would it? You wouldn't get Pelosi. She'd be too busy at home, monitoring tweets and ripping up speeches. So this has actually happened because the Dems are such a mess and because Pelosi wants to get some sort of victory before the midterms. Or, more generously, because she genuinely cares about human rights in China.
Or because she wanted to distract attention from the fact that her husband's just been convicted of drunken driving. Did you know that?
This is why it's good to have an actual journalist with knowledge.
Is Nancy Pelosi a dangerous warmonger? Because, I mean, this isn't helping relations between United States and China, is it?
Just quickly...
Well, that sounds like the Chinese government's line there, Mark.
I know.
And I think...
Well, I mean, I've been got at by Beijing, I'm not going to lie. But why is she poking the hornet's nest in this way?
Well, I think she wants... she's not doing it with the official blessing of the Biden administration. She's supposedly done it under her own steam and against the advice of the Pentagon. They're having to say that to kind of cover themselves. And she wouldn't actually be going without Biden's permission. So, of course, it did get clearance, I'm sure. I think she's doing it in order to provide some recognition to Taiwan and to reassure the people of Taiwan that, they have a friend in the United States, and if they are invaded by China, the US might well stick up for them.
That's
it's
You're going with the generous interpretation. By the way, do you think when Nancy Pelosi, because she's known to like a drink, well, people think that, do you think when her husband got done for drunk driving, it was one of those where you swap around? I can't allege that. I would like Toby to allege it and get in trouble.
That sounds libelous, yes.
Yes, that didn't happen. That was just satire.
Her lawyers are watching. We'll have a whip round to pay for your court case. More geopolitical games now from Saturday's Guardian, Nick.
Yeah, Russia ready to discuss prisoner swap, but will resist pressure to free Brittney Griner. So if you don't know who this is, she's a WNBA player, very, very tall, and she's been done with a 9-year prison sentence for possession of hash oil. It was originally in February 22, and now there's some talk of sort of negotiations. Maybe they'll be able to free her, but Russia want us to free other people, the US to free people in response type of thing. And she has a bit of a backstory, this Griner character, because she said that, well, a few things. She was arrested for assaulting her partner. She tried to annul her marriage immediately after her partner admitted she was pregnant, and she cited fraud and tried to immediately annul the marriage. So she has a bit of sort of history. And she famously said that the national anthem shouldn't be played before basketball games because she was so anti-US. And so, inevitably, some of the Republicans, I'm just going to find a tweet for you, have had a few things to say about it. Laverne Spicer said, Brittney Griner just found out that being black, female and lesbian only gets you points here in the country she hates. So there was some satirical or Toby thinks it's probably too harsh comments. But the point is that people like Dinesh D'Souza and people like this are saying, well, look, she's found out now what an actually oppressive regime is. But I'm not saying that I condone that, of course.
Yeah, but I don't suppose she's going to come back and say, I was wrong about the United States. We're actually the freest country in the world and actually have tasted real oppression, and it ain't pretty.
But for 9 years, I don't know.
Yeah, I would have thought that... that there's a back channel, supposedly, that's been set up by Biden and Putin to have a negotiation about a prisoner swap. And I'd be surprised if she isn't returned. I would have thought that they'll work something out with her. It'd be pretty embarrassing for Biden if she remains in jail for 9 years.
Here's hoping. Let's see if we can squeeze two quick ones in before the break. Israel launches new airstrikes on Gaza.
Yes, Operation Breaking Dawn. It's... So Israel has claiming it's killed a commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, which is a militant group supposedly much more hard-line than Hamas, which is saying something. Hamas controls the Gaza Strip. Sounds like this new PIJ group pose a threat to Hamas. So maybe they gave the coordinates to the Israeli military of this commander. And the Israeli military in 2019 killed the predecessor of the current head of PIJ. So it's... and of course, the group itself is claiming that the airstrikes just took out dozens of civilians and didn't kill any military personnel. Usual story.
Blimey, Hamas 2.0, plant-based, not a good look. Let's finish on Mont Blanc climbers asked for €15,000. Why?
Yeah, it's basically a kind of insurance-based system, if you like. They're saying that you go there at your own risk, so it's $10,000 to cover the cost of rescue or $5,000 for a funeral in case you die during the hike. And, of course, if you're really hard up, you can just probably pay the $5,000, just take your chances, and if you do have an injury, just sort of lie there and save some money. But, yeah, it's...
Well, one thing that wasn't clear about this story is that, you have to cough up €15,000 in order to kind of make the attempt. If you make the attempt and you don't need rescuing, you plant your flag at the top of Mont Blanc, come down again, do you get it back? Sounds like you don't, doesn't it?
It does sound rather like that. And they're particularly annoyed with pseudo mountaineers, which I've always hated, wearing shorts, trainers and straw hats. And there's this nice quote here. It says, people want to climb with death in their backpacks, which is... You want Kendall mint cake, don't you? Not death, traditionally.
Why do people do these dangerous treks? Are they numpties?
Well, Toby's into quite extreme sports. You just ask him.
Well,
you have one of those bikes. You've been climbing, haven't you?
The people that go ill-prepared.
I've seen you
and
grind
are a huge burden for locals. And
I'm a kind of kit anti-snob. So I recently came back from Iceland, and there were lots of people hiking in Iceland with those poles. They had sort of special... They were wearing kind of special hiking outfits, and they had the hiking poles, and a lot of kit, not death, I don't think, in their backpacks, but a lot of useful stuff in their backpacks. And like me and my family, we were the Romanian climbers in this story with our trainers, shorts and straw hats. No poles. I think poles are for wusses, You don't need a pole to go on a walk. That's
true. We get that in Cumbria, everyone with two poles up a very gentle hill.
What sort of terrain were you dealing with? Was it icy?
No, it was quite... No, it wasn't icy. We didn't go glacier walking, but it was quite steep in places, and there was quite a lot of kind of gravel underfoot. So, you had to kind of keep your wits about you not to fall over.
Just a bit,
Get that insurance.
It was,
15,000.
We just missed the volcanic eruption.
Just picturing Toby in shorts, and I'll be grazing on that in the course of the ad break. That's it for part one. Lots more to come, including NHS will come up as a topic, Scotland's involvement in the slave trade, and these two will be debating the artistic merits of the Wu-Tan clan. Easy for you to say. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GBNews, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners, me, Mark Dolan. And tonight, the founder of the brilliant Daily Skeptic online news site and the founder of the Free Speech Union as well, Toby Young, and the founder of the Nick Dixon fan club, Nick Dixon.
And you improvised that one, so that was pretty good.
I did. I'm just riffing now. I'm like old Joe Biden. I'm off the prompter. You don't know what I'm going to say next.
You sit there.
I thought you were going to have me down as a third thing I'd done is I'm the founder of the Nick Dixon fact. I was going to hang on a minute.
Never.
No,
never.
I am.
The rule is they only attack me on the show.
A quick word on the Daily Skeptic, which is a news website you started during the pandemic, which I think... What was the original title?
It was originally called Lockdown Skeptics.
Lockdown Skeptics. And you decided that actually it wouldn't be bad if we were sceptical about everything.
Yes, so we've expanded our coverage, so it's not just COVID and lockdowns and associated restrictions. We also look into the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. We're looking at climate change. Is it really man-made? Is it really going to set the world on fire within the next 2 or 3 years? Have Extinction Rebellion got a point, or are they just slightly hysterical? And we also cover sort of woke gobbledygook in all its manifestations. So we call it the unholy trinity: COVID, climate hysteria, and woke nonsense.
And now there's
a cracking read.
Now there's the Weekly Skeptic podcast as well. Just saying that. And
Nick is in fact the host of the Weekly Skeptic podcast, launching on September 6th.
We are all ready for that podcast. I know that there are a trillion podcasts out there. Well, I'm all over that like a wash. So it will be called The Weekly Skeptic, and it's happening in September.
Yeah.
That's a big media event.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
I hope we don't lose you to Toby Young's growing empire, though.
No, I need...
I don't think we can afford him full-time.
You're like Harry Kane, you're not for sale, OK? Exactly. Well, look, let's crack on now, and let's have a look at the NHS in dire straits, Toby.
Yes, so, but it's always in dire straits, isn't it? There's always the shroud waving accompanied by requests for even more money. So more than a third of new doctors joining the NHS last year came from outside the UK and the EU, according to an analysis.
That's a bad thing?
Yeah, I think, wasn't that one of the reasons for Brexit? So, we could get the most talented people from other parts of the world because we weren't committed to admitting as many EU residents as wanted to come here. Anyway, supposedly it's a terrible thing, according to these shroud wavers. And, of course, the NHS has 105,000 staff vacancies at the moment. There's a bit of a workforce labour crisis, labour shortage.
Not helped by the old vaccine mandates, which meant that many medical frontline... Well, I guess, it directly affected the care sector. People were fired if they didn't get the jab. It was threatened on NHS workers. Yes. But that was enough to make people leave the profession.
Yes, and I think the reason they eventually decided not to make good on that threat was because of this workforce shortage and the exodus, yeah.
I mean, look, you mentioned your website, which started as as a lockdown skeptic thing and is now generally sceptical. I think that the NHS reacted to the pandemic culturally in a very bad way, because obviously there was government policy, but just as an organisation, I think they tried to pursue an effective zero COVID strategy within hospitals and medical settings. And I think that's why they're paying the price now. I think the NHS as an organisation got it wrong on COVID.
I think they did. I think they made a critical strategic error at the beginning of the pandemic. Instead of designating certain hospitals as essentially fever hospitals and sending all the COVID patients to those hospitals, they just designated wards within hospitals as the COVID wards, which creates an enormous amount of logistical problems and puts additional demands on staff in a way that if you cordoned off COVID patients in dedicated COVID fever hospitals wouldn't have happened. And apparently the reason that happened is because when the government discussed what to do about COVID patients and where to house them in a way to minimise risk infection and so forth. All the kind of pangendrums, the heads of the NHS trusts, none of them wanted their hospital to be the fever hospital. It's like, no, not my hospital, it's not going to be the fever hospital, it's got to be your hospital. So because they couldn't agree that, they decided not to go with that plan, but to just have COVID wards in every hospital.
And NHS staff had the pingdemic. I mean, this all relates to the problems we have today, because the pingdemic was so bad because doctors, anaesthetists, cleaners, porters, you name it, but importantly, medical frontline professionals were being pinged because they'd been in close contact with someone that had tested positive for COVID. Well, go figure, you're in a hospital.
Yeah.
And a lot of asymptomatic doctors for 2 years were sat at home twiddling their thumbs, not doing operations.
Yep.
And there came a point, and I've had sort of pushback or blowback from this because of, the whole argument about you don't care about COVID or the tragedy of COVID deaths. But in the end, medics were ignoring the instructions to stay home because they thought, well, if I don't go in today, people will die.
Yeah, and I think there are still, tens of thousands of NHS staff who are sitting at home because they've supposedly been in contact with someone who has COVID or because they've got COVID themselves. I mean, it's still a problem afflicting the NHS to this day. They just haven't got their COVID
It's a nasty, nasty virus, and it's claimed too many people, and it's a tragedy, and we're not going to underplay that. But, Nick Dixon, are we going to get to a point in relation to this pandemic? I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3.4 million Brits had COVID. Are we going to get to the point where people will be allowed to go to work if they've got COVID? That if you've got COVID, it's no longer a quarantine matter?
Yeah, didn't we already kind of get to that point a little while ago? I think that's kind of...
I'm not sure that the public sector got the memo.
Well, I mean, because a lot of people just won't test now anyway, so they effectively might be doing that anyway. So, yeah, I think we sort of...
I still think this winter, though, millions of people say, they'll go on Twitter and they'll take a picture of the positive test, and then that's a week off for them.
Well, they're still wearing masks as well. And in my local supermarket, someone was wearing a mask today. They had a child, they were at a till, they had a child at an entirely separate till just in the way, and they weren't trying to do anything to move that child to a more reasonable position, blocking that till. And that's the kind of people that wear masks, Mark.
I've got no opinion on masks.
I know.
I've always been very relaxed about that issue.
The interesting thing about the current outbreak is that it's now in retreat, according to every metric. So, 2.5 million people had COVID a couple of weeks ago. Far fewer have COVID now, and it's just naturally declined without the imposition of any. Can you believe it, Mark? Without any COVID restriction, masks weren't brought back. We didn't have another pingdemic. We weren't told to remain in our homes, and miraculously, it's just disappeared of its own accord. Who would have thunk it? Makes you think that maybe the lockdowns weren't that sensible.
Careful, that crazy talk will get you cancelled, Toby.
That's right.
Let's move on to Saturday's Guardian and forget ankle tags. It's all about Orwellian smartwatches. Nick?
Yep, facial recognition smartwatches to be used to monitor foreign offenders in UK. So migrants who have been convicted of a criminal offence will be required to scan their faces up to 5 times a day using smartwatches. And you see, to me, never mind people smuggling. This is how they smuggle in authoritarian tech. You do it through... Now, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, Mark, as you know, but they do it like this. The migrants are quite unpopular, especially the working-age men ones with pocket knives. So you say it's migrants. Suddenly, you've got us all scanning our faces 5 times a day. That's my problem with this. Now, the Home Office is very keen to say it's not even migrants, it's foreign nationals who have committed crimes, basically. Perhaps migrants is a sort of Guardian spin on it. But I'm a bit concerned that, that we use this to suddenly have everyone scanning their face all the time.
They get their foot in the door.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, the problem with this story is I read it and couldn't understand what the kind of government's rationale for this was. Why is it going to help us feel safer if foreign nationals who've committed crimes in the UK have to kind of scan their faces
constant
5 times
selfies.
And send the information to the Home Office? I mean, why is that an alternative to incarceration?
And there's a question. Saturday's Guardian now, and we've got a story on a new ethical development from the Spanish justice system, Toby.
Yes, so a Spanish court has ruled that a paraplegic man who he fired on, he was a security guard who opened fire on some of his colleagues because he was so unhappy with pay and conditions at Securitas, the security company he was working for, wounding several of them. And he was shot by a police sniper in the spine, rendering him a paraplegic. And as a consequence, he's asked to be euthanized. and you can be euthanised in Spain. But what makes this case controversial is he wants to be euthanised before he stands trial for going on this kind of shooting rampage. And so his request to be euthanised is being objected to by one of the wounded officers whom he shot when he went on this kind of spree. But I think a court has decided that no, he can be euthanised even before he stands trial.
That is, human rights trump the judicial system or the judicial process.
Yeah, I guess. And he claims that he's suffering a great deal. He has, 45 stitches in one hand, can barely move his left arm. He's full of screws, can't feel his chest. His quality of life is so low that he wants to be euthanised.
Nick, you're a man of faith. Does religion come into this?
Well, yeah, I'm instinctively against euthanasia, not just for Christian reasons, just instinctively against it. I mean, this is an extreme case. Though in some cases, I sometimes think, should we bring back the death penalty? Maybe there's a contradiction there. But if someone's definitely murdered someone, maybe we should. I don't know. I don't have the answers, Mark. I do think if you're firing on your co-workers, it's a pretty horrific crime. We've all considered it, obviously, but, I think it goes too far to actually do it.
Do you think that he will in some way be escaping justice if he kills himself?
Well, there's an element of that, perhaps, isn't there?
You can see why this injured police officer who was shot by him wants his day in court, and wants an opportunity to see justice done, and would feel perhaps slightly cheated.
I mean, his life does sound horrific, like you said, but then again, he's shot a load of co-workers.
Yeah, it sounds to me like he's getting the easy way out. If I was a victim, a family member of one of those victims, I would not be happy. But there you go. Where is Leo Kearse when you need him? This one in Saturday's Telegraph. Nick.
Usually here, so I don't know, it must be the one day of the year he's not. Telegraph, Scotland has whitewashed its slave trade role out of history exams to vilify the English. Doesn't sound like them. A leading historian has claimed this, and he said that Glasgow had a particular role in the slave trade. They imported tobacco, rum and sugar. This is Professor Neil McLennan. And they're trying to sort of keep this out of education, say it was all the nasty English. And it's led to a quite amusing situation where a Tory MP, Oliver Mundell here, is saying that they need to talk about slavery more. Because traditionally, a Tory MP might say, we've gone on about this colonial stuff so much, can we tone it down a bit? He's saying, no, talk about Scotland's role in it. We want to hear more of that. And he said basically that he's accused the SNP government of an insidious attempt to rewrite aspects of our history in a misleadingly partisan fashion. Sounds about right. And he's saying it's vital that our students are taught an accurate account of historical events, not one influenced by Scotland's exceptionalism. So basically, Glasgow, you did it as well.
Yeah, and it's an odd thing for a Tory politician to be arguing for. There was quite a nice addendum to this story at the end in which it talks about other ways in which the SNP has tried to doctor the Scottish curriculum. So in one 27-page long document entitled The Road to Scottish Parliament Taught in Schools, it included a debunked myth that Sir Winston Churchill dispatched English troops and tanks to Glasgow in 1919 to quell unrest. Didn't happen. It was just made up by the SNP. It also said that William Wallace, as featured in the film Braveheart, had been, quote, an inspiration to Scottish nationalists since his death in 1305. But the best one was, it said, in an official history of Scotland produced by the country's tourism board, Visit Scotland, it put the election of the SNP's first MP in 1945 as more historically significant than Britain's victory in the Second World War. So
that's hubris, isn't it? My goodness. Staying in Scotland, what better person to discuss this one from Saturday's Times than the president of the Free Speech Union? Toby, take it away.
So, £500 fine for singing racial slurs. So, a Shetland man has been fined £500 for using the N-word as he sang along to a song by the Wu-Tang Clan called Protect Your Neck. So, he hasn't been fined, interestingly, for singing along to this song in the ladies' toilets at a boating club in the small hours of the morning during a party. So he went into the ladies' loos, maybe the men's loos were full, who knows. He didn't know that there was a mixed-race woman in one of the cubicles, presumably because the door was shut. So he started singing this song, and it really offended her, and she complained, and eventually the police were called. And, the court, I think, has accepted that he didn't intend to cause any offence, but nonetheless, his behaviour was unacceptable, and he's been fined £500 for committing this offence, using the N-word in what is effectively a public place in front of a woman of colour.
That seems outrageous to have a £500 fine. Of course, you're talking about the toilets. We don't know how he identified, so we should say that. But it seems very unfair to me because Kendrick Lamar, the famous rapper, about last couple of years or so, he got a girl on stage to sing one of his songs, and she sang that word because it's in the song. Then he chastised her and stopped her, which seems a bit churlish when it's in the song and you've invited someone on stage. But the rules are complicated. Chris Rock famously said in a famous routine back in the day that the rule is it's got to be in the song. So if it's in the song, he was giving a pass to say it. I don't know when that rule officially changed, but it seems to have changed somewhere along the line.
I mean, am I naive
Yes.
about this, Toby? I am generally, aren't I? But can't we live in a world where people can say or sing outrageous things and just receive public condemnation rather than a fine or legal action?
Yeah, it does.
Isn't it enough just for it to be taboo that you don't say that word, which is, I think, what it was before we got micromanaged by the authorities?
Yes, I mean, it does seem a little bit harsh to force him to pay £500 when he was just, presumably drunkenly singing along to a song. I mean,
he wasn't saying it. There is a difference, isn't there?
There is a difference, yes. And I mean, I have arguments with my children in which they think that teachers, when reading out passages from, say, of Mice and Men, when a character, an unpleasant bigot, uses the N-word and it's in the text, I think the teacher, when reading the text out to the class, should be able to use the word. I mean, after all, it's intended not to be... It's intended to indicate how unpleasant the character using the word is. But my kids think, no, that's taboo. Though, interestingly, they said that there'd been an incident at the school when a teacher had done this, and the only people to complain were the kind of white saviours
of course
in the classroom, none of the children of colour. They actually found the complaints and the fuss made about it really embarrassing.
Yeah,
but if you can't use the N-word in Steinbeck, then you're diluting his anti-racist message.
Well, yeah.
So it's exactly like having trigger warnings or even cancelling an episode of Fawlty Towers that mocks the Little England xenophobia of Basil Fawlty. That was an anti-racist episode which was cancelled by woke people.
Yes. And presumably the same defence could be made. I mean, I'm not familiar with Protect Your Neck, but the title suggests it's about lynching, which means that the word does have a kind of artistic significance in the context of this song.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I'm obviously a bit of an absolutist about this, but I would also go as far as to say, here's another rule of thumb, because, that N-word used in polite company is horrific. But what would normally happen is you'd use that word and you'd get death stares and people would be very upset and you'd think, crikey, I won't say that again, which is how we used to resolve unacceptable words back in the day without resorting to calling the cops. But here's the other thing. My red line is you don't touch art, even if it's unpalatable art. So if Steinbeck contains a passage with the N-word in, well, that Steinbeck wrote that. We, the current generation, have no right to revisit great works of art, even if we don't like the words or the message.
And one of the criticisms made of the Scottish Hate Crime Act, which has received royal assent but which hasn't yet been activated, is that it will mean that artists can be prosecuted for hate speech, even when performing, say, the works of Shakespeare. And one of the things about the online safety bill, I think that most people aren't yet aware of and should be aware of, is that it compels Ofcom to remove from the internet and to fine companies up to 10% of their annual global turnover if they don't remove from the internet something which is illegal, unlawful in any part of the UK. So if something is just unlawful in Scotland, it will mean that Ofcom prevent everyone in the rest of the United Kingdom from being able to say it or see it on the internet. I mean, Liz Truss recently said that Nicola Sturgeon was an attention seeker who should be ignored, but her government, the government she's been part of, wants to pass a law which would make it impossible to ignore the draconian new anti-free speech measures in this Hate Crime Act, because Ofcom would be charged with prohibiting speech which at the moment is just prohibited in Scotland across the internet, across the United Kingdom.
Although oddly, you're almost making a case for independence there. If Scotland was separate, it wouldn't affect us.
Well, yes, indeed. Look, fascinating conversation. We've got lots more where that came from. In fact, we saved our best till last. Fear not, in the third and final chapter, we will be discussing Alex Jones, a broadcaster who has achieved some notoriety in recent years and now in legal hot water. Toby will be discussing private schools, and I'll be talking about a questionable pair of shorts. I'll see you shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight, in the company of Toby Young and Nick Dixon. We kick off part 3 with the recent trial of InfoWars' Alex Jones. Nick, who is Alex Jones? What is InfoWars? What's going on?
Well, Alex Jones is a famous talk show host in America. He has this show, InfoWars. It's very outrageous.
Is he like Graham Norton, basically?
He's really not. It's very outrageous. It's so-called conspiracy theories or freedom fighting, depending on which side you're on, and he extemporizes at length about various things, like whether certain drugs are turning the frogs gay was a classic example. You know, whether there's... You know, he was ahead of the game with COVID and things like that, but he did get in trouble for talking about Sandy Hook, and that's what this story's about. And the headline's Alex Jones worth up to $240 million, expert says, as his family seek punitive damages, and they say he's worth between... He claims his company's worth between 135 and 240 million, and he's been ordered to pay 4.1 million for defaming Sandy Hook parents by claiming shooting was a hoax. So what he did, he tends to get very carried away, and he uses hyperbole a lot. And he got down this conspiracy rabbit hole where he claimed that Sandy Hook didn't happen, and obviously that's very offensive to the parents. So he's been in years of legal trouble about it. Now, to be very fair, he did apologise. He has apologised at length. He said, "No, I now know it's 100% real. I got carried away." And he's been on Joe Rogan's show talking about it. And people have attacked me on Twitter saying you can't defend Alex Jones. Overall, there is a case for him. Obviously, this is very offensive to the parents, but overall, he is someone who's very interested in freedom of speech. He fights for freedom of speech. He was the first to expose things like the Bilderberg Group, which is a real thing. They used to deny it. Now they all admit it's this group where the elite meet. He also exposed Bohemian Grove, which is this mad thing where the elites go to a kind of festival and they worship an owl god, which sounds absolutely mental, but he has video footage. There's a book called Them with John Ronson where they go and explore it. And actually, although it sounds insane, that's the elites that are insane. But whether they're doing it as a kind of pantomime, they do actually do this. So there's this meme, Alex Jones was right, because he says crazy things and then they come true because he's ahead of the game. Sometimes he's not ahead of the game and he just says crazy things. So that's what's got him in trouble here. But I still think it's politically motivated. They want to shut him down. They've banned him from all kinds of things. You can't even say his name on certain platforms. He's called himself the most banned person in the country, in the United States. And they know he's effective because Donald Trump came on his show in 2016, did an interview with him. Alex Jones, who'd always been very critical, he'd been very critical of George Bush, he was critical of authority, he was critical of the neocons, but he then went hard behind Trump, which he'd never done before, really, with a candidate like that. And he was part of getting him elected. So they know he's effective, so they want to shut him down. Obviously, what he said about Sandy Hook was terrible, but this is partly politically motivated, the attack on Alex Jones. That's all.
Toby, this is another free speech debate, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you have the right to deny a human tragedy like a mass shooting?
Well, I think in this case, if you're claiming that it didn't actually really happen and that the victims were just crisis actors, I mean, I'm not as familiar with this story as Nick is, so I'm not sure exactly what he said, and I know he's not saying that anymore. But that does seem to cross a line, and I think it would be hard to defend it.
Well, it's
as
sort
free
of a
speech.
libel on the victims, in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the why he's been found, guilty is that many of his supporters, fired up by this conspiracy theory about Sandy Hook, supposedly harassed the grieving parents of children killed by the gunman, claiming that they were crisis actors and they were making this stuff up, and that obviously compounded their difficulties during a very kind of trying time for them. He sort of said, well, I'm not responsible for my crazy followers. People do crazy things all the time. You can't hold me responsible. But, it feels as though there was a degree of complicity between him and some of these crazy people. But I'm not as familiar with the story as Nick.
Briefly, Nick, why did he make this claim about Sandy Hook, which is, of course, an appalling lie? Why did he do that?
He made the claim because he said at that time he was so in the conspiracy world, people are sending him so much information that he ended up thinking everything was fake. And then, when people used to say he was Bill Hicks, there was a conspiracy theory that Alex Jones was actually Bill Hicks, the deceased comedian who died in the 90s. And so he said, when I started realising I'm not Bill Hicks and they're all saying I am, OK, some conspiracies are not real. So he just basically he's working very hard. He got very, very into the conspiracy world to where he thought everything was fake. And it's obviously appalling, but the one argument is the media has lied to us so much that people begin to ask questions and they end up thinking everything is fake. Yeah. And I just to add one thing to my claim that it might be politically motivated, I've seen pictures on Twitter, and I can't say if they're real or not. I've just seen them where the judge, people have found pictures, alleged pictures of the judge that say, and she's got things like vote Democrat, stay home, I got my vax. So the question, there's that as well, and that's obviously going to be someone that doesn't like Alex Jones, but I can't confirm that.
I should say, as a general principle, I don't think that people should be prosecuted for disseminating conspiracy theories. I don't think conspiracy theories should be removed by Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Surely the best way to debunk conspiracy theories is to allow people to put them out there and then confront them with the evidence in the public square. And that seems to be what's happened in this case. He's put the conspiracy theory out there. It's been completely debunked, and he's now acknowledged that actually Sandy Hook was 100% authentic.
Just like the people on YouTube who think the Earth is flat, it ain't, but good luck to them if they want to claim it is, and we can just laugh. Or the historian David Irving, who horrifically denies the Holocaust. But again, you just can look at the piece of rubbish that is his book and condemn it, but don't actually have those books pulped or have him cancelled. But look, it's an interesting debate. We've got 4 more if we can squeeze them in. They're all really good. Let's talk about schools now, Toby. In Saturday's Mail, you've founded a free school very successfully. What's this story?
So this story is the Office for National Statistics has looked at data from 38 million people and compared the earnings of those from private schools with those who received free school meals and went to state schools, which is the official marker of poverty, of deprivation. And they found that on average, even if you control for everything, so I think in this particular study, they controlled for qualification level, educational attainment, work experience, ethnicity, and region, and even controlling for all those things. Adults who as children have been on free school meals earned on average 20% less than adults in exactly the same professions, of exactly the same kind, ethnicity, and so forth, but who'd been to private schools.
Easy question. Why?
Well, there's speculation about that. They don't know why.
Self-confidence bred into private school kids?
They said, one of the researchers said, differences we cannot measure here may include an individual's soft skills, such as confidence or networking, or their knowledge of the job market. So maybe, when parents pay for a private education, one of the things they're paying for is for their child to be better networked when they leave school, so
although
they can
neither
navigate the job market
of you educated privately, you're now on national television.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, I didn't have free school meals, but I went to a comprehensive school. You don't have that network for life that some of the public schools and private schools seem to have. You don't have the confidence, you don't have the skills. None of us knew how to pass an Oxbridge exam, even if we had the grades. I had the third highest grade in the country on my A-level syllabus. It didn't matter. No one said go to Oxbridge. And people on free school meals, as this talks about, are in an even more of a troubling position. We recently found that white children on free school meals, only 13.6% go to universities. So, yeah.
Can you stop that talk, because that doesn't fit the narrative?
OK.
Moving on to Saturday's Mirror. And this is very similar to the reason I'm no longer allowed to take part in the parents' race at my children's sports day, Nick.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, athlete comes in last in 400-metre race after penis falls out of shorts. Hopefully his penis, because the last thing you want to find is someone else's penis in your shorts. That's a bit like the old thing about the worm in the apple.
Can you contain yours in shorts? I can't imagine you can.
No, I have to run in trousers, and it's very conspicuous. And I've received a lot of...
I've heard it sort of gets rolled up like a sort of fire hose.
It is a problem, Mark. That's why I've switched to predominantly weight training instead of cardio. But yes, so this is Alberto Nonino, and he started off promisingly, but then he went past two rivals in spectacular style on the last bend of the race, presumably. But then he was filmed grabbing his crotch up to 6 times, up to, Mark, we don't know the exact number, and he fell behind in the race. He's talked about it on Instagram after, and everyone's laughing, but he said it's actually, he said, I'm trying to laugh, but immediately after I felt terrible. I'm thankful to my friends and family for helping me get over what happened. And he's saying someone more sensitive would be taking it very badly. So it's not great to be him. It's obviously comic.
One thing I didn't quite understand about this story is, why did his penis falling out of his shorts as he was sort of, completing this 400-metre race slow him down? I mean, it wasn't hurdle. If it was hurdles, you can imagine that might slow you down. You might think twice about leaping the next hurdle. But if it was just a race... But apparently, if I didn't know this, but apparently if your penis does fall out of your shorts in a race, you have to hold it, which is why he's accused of... in order to stop it flopping around. That can
I say I've got a solution?
Damage.
I use gaffer tape and a pulley system.
Well, what about a jockstrap? I mean, isn't that the normal solution?
He went commando. That's a key thing.
Well,
he wasn't
got a picture. Got a photo. Take a look at
Have
this.
we?
Those are the shorts.
Oh, I see.
And let me tell you, I'm wearing them now. Thank God you can't see me from the waist down. Can it be done? Can we do 2 stories in 2 minutes? Saturday's Telegraph, and the French seem to be losing their appetites for carnivorous words, Toby.
Yes, so the French are about to ban vegan food brands from using meaty words, like describing a vegan plant-based product as being like bacon, for instance, or lardons, or whatever it might be. So that French butchers, the French meat industry, has kicked up a big stink about this.
Good.
And from now on, they're not allowed... I mean, I've always thought it's a bit curious. If you're a vegan, and you disapprove of meat eaters, you find the concept of eating meat kind of disgusting. Why do you want to eat stuff that looks like meat or pretends to be meat? It's kind of weird.
Why does the burger need to bleed?
Yeah, it's like being gay, but then just going out with people who dress up as the sex you're projecting.
Speak for yourself, Toby.
They should commit.
Each
what
to
you're
their
saying.
own. You've not met Mrs. Dolan. She's got a very square jaw. And now listen, Nick. We've got anything to say on that?
We don't have to. I can see you want to do... No,
You've got some funny jokes
No,
about
I've got nothing. No, it's too late, Mark.
Give me your best joke about it.
No, I was going to say it's a bit weird. You think it's got meat and it has. It's like going out with a trans person. It's probably best we didn't get to it.
I tell you what, we're hanging on the edge of our seats. Let's finish on shoes in the Daily Mail online.
Yeah, are you shoe that's enough, which is a pun, like sure, but shoe. It's a pun from the Daily Mail, Mark, not a good one. Women take an average of 6 pairs of footwear with them on holidays, survey shows. So 3 in 4 women who answered the survey admitted taking 5 or more pairs away. Some women even get friends to stash them in their suitcase because of their deadly shoe addiction, whereas men, 68% of men manage with 3 pairs. I can't afford to go on holiday or buy shoes, so it's a no-brainer.
Toby, how do you travel? I mean, smart shoes, trainers, sandals?
I wanted to share with your viewers, Mark, something my father came up with. He was once going to Australia on a 2-week work trip, and all he was taking with him was a small brown leather briefcase. And I remember saying to him, how have you managed to pack everything in that tiny briefcase for a 2-week trip to Australia? He said, aha! And he showed me that he was wearing 2 shirts, 2 suit jackets, 2 pairs of suit trousers. I mean, the man was brilliant.
How many pairs of shoes?
A brilliant conversation with Toby and Nick. Stick around for GB News, and I'm back tomorrow at 9, and we've got headliners tomorrow at 11. See you then.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.